No. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. My name is Mark Ross, and with me this afternoon is Liana Lucine. Liana is a retired police officer from London and a author of the book Men Ignored. Liana, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Thank you. I asked you this question before, but I'm going to ask you a question again. What's it like being a police officer in London?
It's an incredible job. It's a vocation. It certainly becomes part of your identity. Even now that I'm retired, it's still part of me. It's the largest police service in the UK, and it's quite famous, I think, throughout the world, throughout history. People talk about New Scotland Yard. That was one of the locations of one of our offices, so people might be familiar with that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I started off in uniform policing. So when you answer what you would call 911 calls, or what we would call 999 calls. And then after that, I moved into different specialist units. And I also became qualified as a trainer. And that's where I started by training recruits, other specialist units and departments, leadership, all of that type of stuff. And I left in 2019 and stayed within the training world, but working in other industries and other sectors.
Okay. What made you become a cop in the first place?
Well, do you know what? Somebody said I should be when I was, I think, 21. And I thought, nah, what are you talking about? And I'd not really taken it seriously or considered it as a career. And it wasn't until I was 27 that I thought about it again. I think there was a recruitment campaign. And when I actually thought about it in more depth, I thought, yeah, I could do that. I'm good in a crisis. I love people. I'd like to help people. And I thought, yeah. And I went for it. And that was it. It was great. That's where my career started. It is part of the, best part of my career, I think. So I really loved it. Yeah, it turned out it was for me.
Mm, nice, nice. You didn't have any dangerous episodes, I take it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, many, many dangerous episodes, especially if you work in London. You are going to face danger, most shifts that you're on duty. However, there are more units. Whereas if you work outside of London, what we call working in the counties, other police forces, they have far less officers and they're more likely to be what we call single crewed on their own, which of course is far more dangerous. So the danger is different. Although in London you have far more crime, a much more diverse range of crime, more violent crime, much more likely to encounter a knife, a fight, all of that sort of stuff, more so than out sort of in the countryside. If you work in the countryside in the counties, so you're on your own, which is incredibly difficult. So it's sort of pros and cons depending on what type of police force you work in.
Okay. Yeah, sounds about right. Sounds about what the average cop does and the arrangements thereof. But Liana, the topic of discussion that we are here to talk about are male victims of abuse. Talk to me about what that looks like, uh, and what have you witnessed in your line of work?
Well, I think when I joined in 2001, when I was 27, I probably had a lot of stereotypes in my head, which I wasn't even aware of. I'd been watching TV, looking at films, reading books, being amongst other people for my life. And I thought, okay, this is my idea of what male victims look like, what abuse looks like, etc. But it actually turned out to be something different when I actually encountered it as a police officer. For example, if you'd said to me when I joined, what does domestic abuse look like? I probably would have pictured a very dominant, aggressive man physically assaulting, being violent towards his wife. Yeah, male versus female, male suspect, female victim. But actually, as a police officer, what I dealt with was quite a wide variety of situations. Some couples were same gender. Some couples, the woman was the aggressor. Some couples, they were both as violent and as nasty as each other. It wasn't just like one good, one bad.
Mm.
So there was a real variety. So it did not fit the picture at all that we tend to see even today in social media and in TV and film. So that was the first thing that really surprised me.
Wow. What's the percentage of men that that are abused, that are violated.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you ask because it's actually much higher than most people would think. And again, I think it's down to these stereotypes we keep seeing everywhere. For example, I think if you asked a lot of people what the percentage is, a lot would say, oh, I don't know, 5, 10% maybe of all victims of domestic abuse are men. Actually, no, it's closer to 40%.
Jesus,
40%.
what?
Yeah. Yeah, in the UK, absolutely. So, that's almost half. It's getting close to half half. And yet when we picture it, we are always picturing women as the victims, not men. And there are lots and lots of support groups for women. There's lots of networks, very few for men, very few shelters for men, for male victims of abuse. So it really doesn't equate when you look at, what happens in response.
So when you mentioned that it's about 40 and a percent and increasing, is this, I think you answered the question, but I'm asking, is this male to male or female abusing men or both?
It's both. It's both. So 40% of all victims of all types of abuse will be male victims. So the aggressor might be male or female, but certainly the percentage of male victims is much higher than anyone, I think, really realizes.
Mm. So if that's the case, why don't men report it?
Well, I think that still the way that we raise our sons, the expectations we have of men in general in society, I think we're still teaching them and expecting them to be tough and strong and fight off anyone, male or female, who should be attacking them. They shouldn't be. And they should be able to not be a victim. They should be able to defend themselves and prevent this from happening. Whereas we're much sort of more kind to female victims, much more forgiving and allowing. We seem to be much more accepting when a woman says she's a victim of some type of violence. But a man, we sort of stand back and it's like, well, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you fight back? Why did you let this happen? And we have these very unrealistic, these very unfair expectations, I think, of male victims. So I think it's very hard for boys and men to come forward and talk about the fact that somebody has hurt them because they're afraid maybe of what it says about them, about their masculinity, about their strength. And I think people struggle to listen to and talk to male victims more than female. When a woman is being vulnerable, she's crying, people think, okay, yep, I know what to say, I can comfort her, I can listen, etc. But if a man is vulnerable or cries or admits that he's been a victim of something, I think people feel slightly lost, like they don't know what to say or how to respond. And so I think because men and boys know this, they know that they may not get a great response, a great reaction if they do open up. That again is another obstacle. And what really, really distressed me over the years is what I heard from so many different men, not just the victims that I worked with as a police officer, but also all the men that I trained in training sessions, when they talked about what happened to them when they tried to disclose an experience of being a victim, they were laughed at,
Mm,
which I think is horrendous. And I think, well,
mm.
in 2026, I don't think we would laugh at a woman if she said she'd been harassed or sexually assaulted. But I can still tell you, men are having that experience of being laughed at, of men taking other men taking the mickey out of them, and other people not believing them or dismissing their suffering.
That's pretty damn sad.
Very.
That that we're still in a society where men have to hold it in.
Yeah.
Even when their reasons for wanting to vent and do something is valid.
Yeah.
Society will still, for lack of a better phrase, shit on you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you have a really bad reaction the first time you disclose something, the first time you tell somebody, well, that's just going to put you off telling anybody, isn't it?
Mhm.
And that's difficult because who are you likely to tell? It might be family, friends, colleagues. It might be a stranger, but yeah, their reaction means everything.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. And it's so it's so disheartening to hear that men are, I mean, it's disheartening to hear that anybody is getting violated or abused or, essayed, what have you. It's messed up altogether. But it's not common. It's still not a common thing. Even though the numbers that you mentioned are crazy high, it's still uncommon for people to hear you say that the percentage of men that are being violated is that high.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think if we saw it more on TV, in films, on social media, it might be more believable. It might be less strange. We might not think, nah, really? Because we're more used to it. And I think if male victims saw themselves reflected in characters in books and TV and film, they might feel more empowered to come forward and actually speak to somebody.
Sure. Now, here's an interesting question. I'm talking to you, and it just gave me this question. What do you know the percentage of violence among men in a same sex relationship?
I don't have those figures to hand. I don't. I could find them and sort of email them to you afterwards, but only in the UK. But I certainly did see quite a bit of it. Obviously, I think for men and women, sometimes the figures can vary, as in a woman is always going to be more in danger from a partner.
Mhm.
Whereas for men, the figures are slightly different. They can experience, say, for example, more stranger rape because their behaviors can be quite different. They might go and meet somebody more at a bar or at a sort of undisclosed location, etc. So that will affect the figures. But certainly, yes, there are a lot of male aggressors.
Hmm. Can you discuss a case scenario that you personally had to work on regarding male victims of abuse?
Well, one of the ones that I mentioned in my book, which I think sort of demonstrates how we can all make presumptions, not necessarily with malintent, but we just do, was a colleague of mine, a female detective, who told me about how officers were called to a domestic incident. They turned up and they were greeted by a really, really large, strong man and his very small, petite wife. And she was quite sort of upset and distressed, and she was showing officers her wrists, and there were just some very sort of mild red marks on her wrists. But she was saying that her husband, had assaulted her. And officers did what they were supposed to do. They separate the two and they speak to both. But the man was very shy, very quiet, and he was very reluctant to speak. So, because the only allegation of assault was from her, officers did what they did and they arrested him for domestic assault. But what was really interesting is what happened in interview, because they brought them into the interview room, and this friend colleague of mine, this female detective, she interviewed him, and she said in the middle of the interview, all of a sudden he started kind of moving in his seat and looking really uncomfortable and quite distressed. And then all of a sudden, he stood up mid interview and started taking his trousers down, his pants down.
Oh my
And she was
goodness.
like, "Oh, what's going on here?"
Yeah.
But what happened was he exposed his genitals to her because they were bleeding profusely. They were covered in bite marks and nail marks from his wife assaulting him.
Whoa.
And what came out later down the line was that actually she had been abusing him quite horrifically for a number of years.
Oh.
And the night that he was arrested, those slight red marks on her wrist was him holding her wrists to stop her from assaulting him.
Mm, mm, mm.
So it was a real sort of lesson to all, really, that I think, we can often make assumptions, especially if the people you're looking at, say the man you're looking at, looks particularly strong. Sometimes our brains presume, well, he must be the aggressive, he's big and strong. And we look at a woman who's maybe small and light and petite, thinking she couldn't possibly be an aggressor. She couldn't possibly be the perpetrator. Look at her, there's nothing to her.
Mm,
Well, of course, your size and strength are nothing to do,
mhm,
really, are they,
mhm.
with your behavior? Anyone can be abusive. It's totally separate to how you're built, how God made you. And this is something we need to recognize, that really violence, nastiness comes in all sorts of shapes and forms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whew. Pardon the pause. I'm I'm just kind of awestruck about for one, your story, and two, I'm still reeling in the back of my brain that we're even having this discussion because it seems to me that men that are dealing with these scenarios are they they're it's like being on a raft going upstream. You have nobody to talk to.
Yeah,
You have nowhere to go. Is there organizations and groups out there that cater to men that are abused and violated, Leon?
absolutely, absolutely. They are, and they do exist. And I list them on my website, free resources for all male victims, so they can find that help.
Okay.
But I think what saddens me is there's just not enough. There's really not enough. There's far more support groups and networks for female victims than there are for male victims. And I think this is the difficult thing. We talk about how hard people find these things to disclose. They really do. And what I find interesting, for example, is say, for example, if you look at sexual assault and how it affects the two genders when it comes to reporting, when it comes to female victims, about a third of them will never tell anyone as long as they live about what happened. Not
Absolutely.
family, not friend, not police, nobody.
No.
When it comes to male victims of sexual assault, it's twice as high. It's around 67%. So it shows there is a difference. It's hard for everyone, but it is especially hard for male victims to talk about having been sexually assaulted.
Well, what's the premise of your book, Liana? Men ignored.
So yeah, it's about all the male victims that I dealt with as a police officer, but also all the men who spoke to me over, the last couple of decades when I was delivering training. Police officers spoke to me not just about the victims they dealt with, but they spoke to me about themselves. So they actually talked to me about them having been a victim of some form of harassment, assault, or abuse. And then when I left policing and I was delivering training in all different industries, again, the number of men who disclosed in a session or came and spoke to me afterwards and told me about their personal trauma, their personal experience, was quite astounding. So really, I think this book was about giving them a voice because I just felt like it wasn't a conversation that's being had. We had this fantastic Me Too movement, which I thought was wonderful. And I think a part of me was waiting for the same thing to happen for male victims, but it never really did, not in any sort of significant fashion.
Mm.
So I felt like I needed to put all of their stories and experiences down on paper, which is where the book focuses mostly. And then it really just talks about what else we can do to try and help and support them and to try and turn things around.
Mm. Was your book well received?
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, for the most part, all the comments have been really supportive, really positive, really good, which has been nice to see. There will always be one or two people who misunderstand what I'm saying and think in somehow I'm being disparaging towards women or female victims, which is absolutely not true. I think there's enough compassion in the world for both genders. And I think to give support to male victims doesn't mean we have to take anything away from female victims at all. It's about helping everyone.
Yeah, yeah. When you were uh, were still working your job, uh, how often did you encounter DV cases, for example, where men were the victims?
It was much less often because, of course, we have to bear in mind how difficult they find it to report. So, of course, that's going to be reflected in what a police officer deals with. So it was certainly there were less male victims than female. Yep, very, very true. But I think there were, even from my point of view, there were more than what the public would think and would expect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So curious, what happened to that lady that abused that her husband or her boyfriend's genital area?
Yeah. Oh, she was arrested. She was charged. Yeah, she went to court. Yeah.
Good, good, good. Has there ever been a moment where a man was violated but still found guilty?
So where a man was violated,
Right.
but
If when the man, if have you ever witnessed a scenario where a man was violated,
Hmm.
right? Cops are get involved. Nothing's done to the woman. Have you ever witnessed a scenario where the woman gets off?
Um, well, it depends what you mean by getting off. I think when it comes to criminal justice, there's lots of people we think should go to court and are not sent to court. Certainly as a
Mm,
police officer, we see that a lot because it's
mm,
not our decision of who goes to court. In the UK, it's the Crown Prosecution Service, they decide. So often, police officers can be very upset that there are very strong cases they think should go to court and don't.
yeah.
But that's a whole nother discussion, really.
Really.
Um, I've certainly seen what happens. I found a lot in policing is that you'd get this call and it would come out to you over the radio, and it'd be whatever information somebody had told the operator about, and it would say person A has said this, and they think person B has done that. So you already have a picture, an idea of what has happened. Okay, but then you turn up at the scene, and the number of times it would turn out to be wrong, or the other way round, that actually person A was the perpetrator and person B was the victim. So, what was always so essential as a police officer was to be open minded and to investigate, which means asking a lot of questions, asking everybody, looking for CCTV, etc. And then, of course, when they come back and they're interviewed, then you go into greater depth and you challenge whatever their account is. So, I think, yes, I think I've seen people who should have gone to court and didn't.
Mm,
I've seen, people I think that maybe there wasn't enough evidence. Sadly, I
mm,
thought they did it, but there wasn't enough evidence to prove it. So, of course, you couldn't charge them. So, yeah, I've seen a whole range of scenarios. And that's one of the frustrations of being a police officer is that you want justice, but very sadly, you don't always get to see that.
mm. Wow. And I can just imagine that right now there's someone, it could be a woman, it could be a man. There's someone right now getting hands put on them, getting violated, right? Uh, I mean, again, and I said this earlier, and I'll say it again, violence is something that we should not uh, take kindly to, whether it's a man to a woman or a woman to a man or a man to a man, a woman to a woman. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
yeah,
It shouldn't happen, but yet and still, we're here. We're talking about it. We've seen it on the news where a woman loses her life
yes,
trying to get out of out of an abusive relationship.
yeah.
Uh, have you ever encountered where a man loses his life trying to get out of an abusive relationship, Liana?
I have heard about those cases. I didn't deal with one myself, but certainly, yes, they certainly do exist, and it's absolutely awful. It's so tragic. You do everything within emergency response services, care services to try and provide people with that exit, to
Mm,
provide people with that pathway to safety. Very, very difficult. As I say, there are not many refuge places for male victims of domestic abuse. There's very few places for them, which I think needs to change. I think, as we were discussing, it's very hard for men to talk about and report it. So, without being able to do that, it's very difficult to get that support to get out. And I think one thing I always find very frustrating when we talk about domestic abuse is when people say, well, why don't you just leave? And I want to say to people, all right, how about I say that to you? Could
where
you
you
leave
going?
your life right now? Could you just walk out the door? What about your kids? What about your pets? What about your job? What about your money? What about your clothes? What about your food? Where are you going to go? Have you got somewhere to go? Most people don't actually have somewhere to go. And especially if they've been in an abusive relationship, they've probably been isolated from friends and family. They've lost touch. They've been alienated from, they don't have anywhere to go. They don't feel comfortable in a refuge. Can the refuge take them, their kids? How do they get to work? How do they get the money? Maybe they don't have any control over their money anymore. But it does frustrate me when people think it's just that easy, as in, why don't you just leave? Because it's just so complicated. It's really not.
Mm, mm, mm. It's just amazing how deep that rabbit hole goes when you talk about um, opportunities for people to get out and the obstacles that they face when they make that decision. Where do you go? What do you do? It's it's a lot of elements in that to consider,
Yeah.
but it's just messy, and
Mhm.
you know,
And
yeah,
also, I think that, yeah, and the frame of mind you're in at the time, if you've been in an abusive relationship for any period of your life, and it's not necessarily a partner, you can think back to maybe when you were a child, if you had a particularly unpleasant family life or parents, it really wears your self-esteem down to nothing. It's an absolute nub. You know, you have no confidence to do anything. You have no self-belief that you can do anything, be anything, have the strength to leave, have the strength to find this or do that. It's literally, you know, you're at the worst point in your life. So it's the hardest time to go when you have no self-esteem, no confidence.
wow. So you wrote your book, and the question I guess I'll ask is, do you have any future projects?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't right now, so I'm sort of working on this one at the moment, seeing where this takes me. These are always sort of fields of interest for me. Really, it's the psychology of resilience that fascinates me, and that's something I often, I think, talk about a lot in my training sessions. So these are the themes that I tend to focus on. So maybe something along those lines.
All right, all right. How can people contact you, Liana?
I'm on social media. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. There's my website, Lucine Training. And if you're interested in the book, you can find that on Amazon.
You said Lucine Training.
Yeah,
Okay. Is that .com or
.co.uk.
okay, .com. Okay. If you had a message that you could share to those that are going through uh, any type of abusive situation, what would that message be to them, Liana?
The first message is that you're not alone. The second message is there are plenty of us out here who care very, very much and would do anything we could to support you. So the third message would be find that right person to talk to. As I was saying before, when you pick somebody who reacts badly to what you've shared, that can be really quite devastating. So find somebody who will listen, who will believe you, and who will be kind and sympathetic, and give you the support that you need.
Hmm. A lot of support is needed.
Yeah.
A lot of support is needed. And there's a lot more that we can do too to raise awareness of male related abuse and assault, because
Yeah.
it happens. It
Yeah.
happens. And it goes along the lines of suffering and silence.
Yeah.
Too many people are doing it. And
Absolutely.
it's time that people like yourself and others do the work that you're doing and blow the lid off of this thing so people can get the courage that they need to step out on faith and just be happy and do whatever it takes to be happy.
Yeah. And the first time you talk about is the hardest. It gets easier. It
Hmm.
really does.
Yes, yes. Well, Lucine, I thank you so much for taking the time to uh, speak with me about this particular topic. I'm touched about this issue because this is something that we don't talk about much.
Mm.
In my soon to be 3 years of doing hosting this podcast, I have not had a conversation about this at
Mm.
all. You are my
Yeah.
first,
There you
and
go.
I hope that you are not my last,
Yeah.
because we need more people to speak up on this issue.
Yeah, we do.
We really do. So I wish you the best of luck in your book, and continue to do the great things that you do out there in London.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get another episode going on. I mean, keep me updated on what you do, and let's just stay in touch.
We will do. Be a pleasure.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. As I always say and will continue to say, it's okay to not be okay. Just do something about it. Liana, have a good one.
You too. Take care.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.